coming up next.
As a mother, I had all I could take. I wasn't able to sleep at night. You never know, when the phone would ring, if it was a business call for me to go to the jail or a call saying they'd found my son in a ditch somewhere. So as a parent, you have to start learning to love them from a distance because for your own health, sanity, and you pray over them every day. But ultimately, it's up to them. You can't fix them. They have to want the help and fix themselves.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You're here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter. A woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Welcome to Faith Over Addiction. I'm Tanya Gioia. We are a podcast that supports women who are grounding themselves in Christ and loving those who are struggling with addiction, because what we know is that family support is crucial, and there is a way to do it without losing yourself and without losing your identity. So I have two guests on today, Dee Sanders and Louise Ellison. They've written a book called Hanging by Faith. And this is both some personal and professional stories around what they've experienced in their family lives with their sons. And then Dee, do you want to introduce your professional life as well?
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me on. I truly appreciate it and helping me get the book out there. For 25 years, when I was 25 years old, I divorced a cheating husband and started a career as a bail bondsman and a bounty hunter. And over the next 25 years, that's what I did for a living. So during those 25 years, I dealt with drug addicts and the crimes they committed as drug addicts to, stealing, thieving to get whatever. And then about 20 years into my career, it hit home on a personal level when my son became addicted to hydrocodones. And for a couple of years, it was struggling because I knew how to help other families. I just wasn't prepared to deal with it on a personal level. And it came to an abrupt end of his addiction. He overdosed and was on life support for 5 days. I didn't know if he would live or die, ever be normal again. They couldn't make any promises to me. And I literally stood over his bedside those 5 days praying that this was his rock bottom and that he would wake up, fully recover, and move on for a better life. That did not happen. He got out of ICU, got out of the hospital, and went straight back to the drug house. Now, that wasn't his rock bottom, but it was mine. I had, as a mother, I had all I could take. I wasn't able to sleep at night. You never know, when the phone would ring, if it was a business call for me to go to the jail or a call saying they'd found my son in a ditch somewhere. So as a parent, you have to start learning to love them from a distance because for your own health, sanity, and you pray over them every day. But ultimately, it's up to them. You can't fix them. They have to want the help and fix themselves.
We're going to delve deeper into that story. Louise, tell us a little bit about your background. And you also have a professional background in this area as well.
Yes, my name is Louise Harris, and my company's Last Research and Editing. And Dee came to me asking for editing help for her book. And in the course of interviewing her and writing the book, I realized that a lot of her experiences, I was having the same experiences because my son David, at age 13, he stole our car, and that's what started it all. But he was always doing marijuana. He was always doing, and then my son Alex has ADHD. And so my son would take Alex's medicine and sell it. And he would buy Xanax, and then he got addicted to Xanax, and he was just a mess for at least all through his teenage years. And if I did not have my faith, I would not have survived those 12 years of him and his antics, because it wasn't just stealing the car. It was also, he would take our debit cards, and then he would buy shoes from China, and then he would resell them, and we would be hit with these service charges because we were extended, because he would always spend extra money. And so it was a really hard time dealing with all that.
So let's back up, ladies. Let's talk about the beginning part of the journey. And Dee, what's really interesting is, as you said, these calls could be coming from potential folks that you were going to work with through the jail, through the bonds, or it could be coming from your son. You knew the ins and outs of what this looked like. What
Absolutely.
was the difference when it was your own boy that
Yes.
you were struggling with?
I realized that it's easy to help families from the outside looking in. When you actually have to face it yourself, I mean, this has made me a much stronger woman. I'm stronger in my faith now. And now when parents come to me and they've got a struggling child or a struggling spouse or just whatever they're dealing with, I've dealt with it on both sides. So I'm able to help them to find the resources and the help they need. And when I do that, it helps me as well in the healing process, because once you have, and Louise knows this as well, once you have a family member that struggles with addiction, they're always an addict. And I've seen people be clean for 8-10 years, have a bad day, and it all goes downhill again. And they stumble right back into addiction after 10 years of living in sobriety. So it's something that you really never get over with. You're going to be facing it for the rest of your life.
What was it, Dee, that you needed to learn as a parent versus somebody who worked with really intensely worked with a population that struggled with addiction?
What I had to learn as a parent is it was for many, many years, it was just me and my son. And so I raised him as a single parent and I loved him dearly, and I still do. But I finally realized that for my health and my sanity, I just prayed him over to God. And I started loving him from a distance. I wouldn't let him come to my home because, things get stolen and they get pawned and whatever it takes for them to buy what they need. And so I, when he called, I would always say, I'm praying for you. I love you, but you're not welcome here. That was hard for me as a mother because then you don't know where are they sleeping, are they eating, but in all honesty, that's not their importance. When they set their priorities, whether they can eat or sleep or have a bed to lay down, that's not in their priorities. Their priorities are getting money, getting pills, getting dope, getting high. And so you have to set your priorities as the loved one, turn it over to God, pray over them every day, and just know that until they come to you and say, all right, I'm ready for help. That did happen with my son. It took a while, but one day he said, Mom, I'm ready. And before I just knew that I couldn't let him change his mind. And I hurried and packed him an overnight bag. And before we knew it, he was on a plane where he went to rehab, and he absolutely loved it. But like I said, it's everyday work in progress. There's too many things, change people, places, and things. You've got to change your friends, and there's just so much they have to do, but they have to want to do it first.
Louise, tell us about your experience in the beginning. When did you start noticing things? When did you start noticing things changing?
Well, as I said, the first incident it was 3 o'clock in the morning. We got a call from the police that David had taken our car and run a stop sign. And that was the beginning of his being a rebel. And I say that because that's kind of how it was when it started, that he was just trying to be a typical teenage rebellious person. But when Alex's medicine started disappearing, and I was counting it because it was a 90-day supply, and he was running out at about 2 months, and we couldn't figure out why he was running out of his medicine at the 2-month mark. And you cannot get it renewed until the 3 months are up. So he would go a whole month without his medicine, and we'd have these problems with school. And so when his medicine started disappearing, then I started realizing that it was probably David taking it, and I knew he wasn't actually taking it because I know how the medicine would have affected him not having ADHD. So I assumed that he was selling it. He never actually told me he was selling it, but I'm smart. I understood. So he was selling it, and he would come home and I would be able to smell the marijuana on him immediately, and he would be so bloodshot. Now, the problem with David and looking in his eyes and seeing bloodshot eyes is because he had a concussion when he was 11, and he lost the vision in one eye. And so that eye always looks red and bloodshot. And whenever a police officer sees him, they automatically assume he's not sober because of that eye. But I would look in the other eye because I knew which eye was the good one.
Right.
And when the other eye was bloodshot, I knew that he was on something. And as I said, he would take our debit cards. He would buy these Chinese shoes for $300. And we were constantly having to cancel our cards and get new ones. And then he would do the cycle all over again. So but it started out with him taking the car.
Now, you with David, you were at a point where putting him out of the house was not really an option. He wasn't that
Right.
old.
He was not, he was a minor, and we had, we have moved several times. The first time we lived in Maryland, then we moved to Arizona. He was fine in Arizona. Then when we moved back to Maryland, that's when some of the stuff started, was when we moved back to Maryland. But we had let him go into those diversion programs. And first we did it in Maryland, and he would do all but the community service as his thing. So he never actually graduated out of the diversion program. And then we moved to Florida. And we were able to get him in the diversion program again because it was a different state. And again, he did everything but the community service, which was really odd because we're so involved in our church that he could have done the community service with our church. But anyway, he just didn't want to do it. And the counseling was the other thing that we dragged him to counseling on a regular basis, and he didn't want to do that either. And so it didn't hit. So he was, yes, he was still a minor, but when he was 19, which that makes him an adult, he was charged with armed robbery. And he didn't actually, the videotapes actually shows the other kid doing the armed robbery, but David was the one that was holding the gun, and he was just standing there. But he didn't actually do the beating. He didn't steal the computer, but he was on the videotape as an accomplice. The person that was doing all that, though, got a lawyer almost immediately. And we were trying to teach David a lesson by giving him a public lawyer, but that didn't really work too well. So we had to pay for the money to give him a lawyer. But by the time that the other person got a lawyer, he said that David was the one that had done everything. And so we were lucky that David did not have to go to prison, that the judge took into account that he wasn't on the video. I mean, that he wasn't doing anything on the video. He's just standing there, and that you couldn't really see the gun on the video. So the judge gave him probation and, again, community service. But he just thought it was a joke, and he didn't do any of the things that were on the probation, and he got hit with a violation of probation. And they let him go the first time on the violation of probation, but the second time he had told the probation officer that we were going to Mass on Christmas Eve, only we ended up going on Christmas Day, but the probation officer showed up at our house when we were at Mass. And so they violated him because he wasn't home when he was supposed to be home. So I felt very guilty about that because I thought he went to prison because of me wanting him to go to church on Christmas Day. But the thing was, God always has a plan, and him going to prison was the right thing because he got himself clean. He was in prison for 2 years. He realized he didn't want to ever do that again. And he got himself clean. And now recently he didn't go to prison, he went to jail because he was having issues with his back, and he went back to the marijuana, and they caught it in the car. And so he was in jail for 60 days. But he just recently got out. But he has a new attitude because he has 2 babies, and he realizes he has to be a good father to those babies. And I've noticed a difference. In fact, everybody in my family and my husband's family have noticed a difference in David as far as his attitude goes. But he doesn't really see marijuana as a problem where everybody else does.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but he definitely is not the hardcore like he was. The prison actually helped that. So
as praying women, how hard has this been for each one of you to turn this over to God?
for me, it was very hard because I just didn't see a way out. I didn't see the finish line. I just saw David going deeper and deeper and deeper. But I did say, okay, God, I know you have a plan. You'll protect him. And all those other times, God kept him out of jail, and God gave him all these breaks. It just eventually the breaks ended, but God did give him a lot of breaks, and I do realize that from all my prayers. So
For me, one of the hardest things was standing over a hospital bed where he's on life support. But I knew from that point that I just prayed, God, you're in full control of this. And I just kept repeating that to myself over and over and over. And I knew that if I didn't let go, a lot of people think that they're helping their loved one when actually they're hindering their help because they keep giving them money or giving them something, and they're just feeding their addiction for them. It took a little while for me to realize that. He would come to me and say, I'm starving. I hadn't eaten 3 days. So I'd give him a little money to go get something to eat, knowing I thought, I bet he's not getting, I bet he's not eating with that. And I know he wasn't, but I think I'd done that anyway to clear my conscience. And I was in the wrong line of thinking. So when I turned my thinking around and I realized that I had to let go and let God. And that's all you can do. It's very tough. And every time you start to stress or you worry, your heart gets filled with worry, just sit down and turn it all over to God and pray that he'll help give you the strength and guidance you need to get past it, because God has helped me. He has given me the strength that I've needed through the years to get past all of this.
Were there particular scriptures you hung on to? Was there a community you went to? How did you step through this when it didn't look like it was going to be okay?
I have a lot of close friends and family around here that are also Christians, so that's how I done it. I would turn to them. I sit and talk with God every day. I do not miss, I try not to miss one day. I read the Bible every day, and it's like you open the book and read where he wants you to begin and start the day. But I allot so much time every day to spend with the Father, and just he knows how I feel, but it helps me to communicate it to him. He's the most important one that you should talk to versus talking to, Bob down the street or whatever, because God is in full control and he knows. He knows what we're going through. He knows the strength we need to get through it, and he will guide us.
My favorite passage in the Bible is Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything. But whenever I was going through the situation, even now, I am grateful to God for getting David through all that and getting me and Patrick. But we also, as I mentioned, we are very strong in our faith, and we do help out at the church a lot. And I think just being around other people that have similar values as us helped us get through it. And our families, they were all so supportive. My mother, she lives in Delaware, and when David was on trial the first time, my mother came down to give a character witness testimony. My brother-in-law came down, and also he offered to pay for the lawyer. And so they understood that it wasn't us and how we raised them, it was him making choices. And I think as a parent, you really have to understand that, because I went through that a lot, where I was like, oh, it must be the way I'm raising them, I must be a bad mother. But it's not. He's making choices, and he's the one that is following the devil and not me. So that was something I had to figure out.
Tell the audience how you began to figure out how you decided not to live in guilt and shame. How you decide, because that's just it. You can hide in shame just like you can hide in a bottle, so that
Right.
you're not really dealing with reality. You're dealing with the shame instead of the reality that could actually help yourself and your son get better.
So
So how did you step through that?
it was looking at my other two children. Um, Alex, I had problems with him, but his were all related to his behavior issues. They weren't him choosing to do something illegal. And with Kelly, she was a gifted and talented straight A student. She went to through the International Baccalaureate program, which is a very tough high school program to go through. I mean, she had anxiety issues, but if it was because of me, those two would have also turned out bad. But they turned out to be pillars of society. And even now today, Alex, he has a really good job. He knows what he wants. He goes after it. Kelly is living in Dallas, and she also has a really good job. Both of them graduated from college. David did eventually get his GED, and he has taken some college classes, but he's not really the college type, so I'm not pushing college on him. And as I said, he has two children, and they're just beautiful, and he's raising them correctly. I can see how well he has as a father. He is a very good father. And he is taking a lot of the things that I didn't know he was listening to and giving to his kids. Um, so that's how I stopped feeling guilty. And plus, God kind of told me to stop feeling guilty. And he said, this is him making choices. Just, you're fine. So,
Dee, you had a different experience.
Yes, I don't know that you ever really not feel guilty or feel like there's something that you could have said or done. Or to me, I saw the flags, the red flags, way before he really got bad in addiction. And my only guilt that I have is that I didn't just shut it down right then. I kept thinking that he had just broken up with the true love of his life. So I was thinking, he's kind of rebelling a little bit about that. And he loved her, and she was quite a bit older than him, and moved 2 or 3 states over. And I thought he would pull himself out of it. And then by the time I realized that he was deeper into it than what I had thought, it was already too late. So I think it's important for parents to know the red flags that there are. And as soon as you see the red flags, don't hesitate, don't wait, because there is help. And the faster you get them help, the more effective it will be for them to get their life straightened up and back on the right track.
Talk us through
And
some of the red
so
flags
I
that
do
you
feel
saw.
guilty about that at times.
Dee, talk us through some of the red flags that you saw early on.
Okay. So his behavior, number one, the behavior turns hateful. Everything's my fault. I need money. And when he asked for money and I didn't give him money, it would be heck to pay. I mean, he would just, so that was one thing. And that was not like him. He was the class clown at school and, always kidding around joking. And he done a 360. So if you see their behavior change, that's number one. Number two is their friends that they're hanging out with. And if and unfortunately, I did know the friends he was hanging out with were not good for him. Coming home all hours of the night and not listening to the curfew, smell like, if they're doing marijuana or whatever, bloodshot eyes. there are so many red flags, but their behavior will give it away. If they don't go to sleep for 2 or 3 days, or if they don't eat, and a lot of times if they're adults, they will just avoid you. If they're high, they won't come around you unless they need something. And then, like Louise, she said he would take the credit cards and stuff. If you see anything missing in your home and you suspect your child is taking it along with those other red flags, stop it right then. That's the best way to get this under control, because if they'll steal one thing, they'll steal many. Unfortunately, throughout my son's addiction, about $40,000 worth of stuff left my house and was sold on the black market for pills. So if I had all the stuff back, and a lot of times I didn't notice it missing because I didn't need it right away, like our generator, our $5,000 generator. When we did need the generator and we went out back to get it, it was not there. And so it's so important there's many more red flags. I wished I had written them down to where I'd have them, but you will notice a great difference in your child's behavior.
And when you're looking at this, both of you, what is it? I mean, it may be different for each one of you. What do you feel you could have done at the time had you said, okay, I am going to face the truth of what's happening and I'm going to take some action? With hindsight being 2020, what could you have done?
I honestly don't think there was anything that we could have done differently, because we knew what was happening. We knew he was stealing from us. We knew he was taking the car. We called the police on him several times, and that wasn't enough. It wasn't until he got caught himself without us being involved that it actually changed his thinking. I think he was just going to do what he wanted to do. We had a curfew on him. We had an alarm, and we didn't give him the code. So we knew when he was sneaking out the house because he would set off the alarm. And that didn't work either. So there was a lot of things that Patrick and I had done that didn't change his mind at all.
Okay, here is what happened with my son. I set up an intervention, and we had a list. There was several of us, friends, family. We had made a list of opportunities for him to take, rehab, whatever. It's either that or that was it. We're going to break all ties with you. But if you say it, you have to mean it. And if they're facing looking at all their family, and families are crying and tears are flowing, and their hearts are breaking, that they even have to give the ultimatums. But that is, a lot of times, will open their eyes, because they feel the love. They know they've been messing up. They know that they need the help. And a lot of times, if they go to jail for a day or two, that is not even long enough to get clear-headed again. It takes a good 30 days at least, if they've been doing drugs, for them to think clearly at all and make proper decisions.
So you did an intervention. Did you invite somebody who was a specialist in this? Did you just do it as a family? How did you set that up?
I did. I had it all set up. I had spoken to the judge and asked him if he would help me in the matter. And I told him I wanted to do a criminal trespass against Justin, knowing that he would break and come to my house. But my plan was to serve him with a criminal trespass, let him come to my house. I was going to call 911. A deputy was going to come pick him up, put him in jail. The next morning at the jail, I arranged for several of us to have a meeting with him at the jail, which was an intervention. And I gave him the option. You can either spend a year in jail for criminal trespass, which I had made that up, but he didn't know that. or you can come. And I had the liaison from the rehab there. I had Justin's bags packed and ready for him to go. I was hoping and praying he was not about to tell me no. And the liaison explained it to him and said, the jail is going to set you free in my custody if you'll come and go with me. And he said, where do I sign? And he left with the liaison. Now, the rehab didn't do any good because he wasn't ready. He was just trying to keep from staying in jail. But that was my first crack at intervention. And I started learning how to make it more effective. And during the time that he was in rehab, I got permission to speak with his counselor. And, they have counseling sessions just about every day. And I was able to help them to understand he was not telling them because he wasn't even being honest with them. How can you get help when you're not being honest with your counselor? But it did do some good. He did no longer come to my house, try to steal and do all that because he knew that he wasn't going to get by with it. So I was successful in getting him to quit thieving and stealing because he knew the consequences behind it.
So you did set up a boundary that was effective, even if the rehab was not.
Yes, exactly. There was some good and bad that come out of that rehab and the intervention. So I was extremely thankful for that.
So to back away from what you did for your sons, what were you doing, each one of you, for yourselves to stay sane in this very trying, very trying space? And it wasn't like this just ended in a year or two. You guys are talking about at least a decade apiece, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So how did you support yourselves? What did you do for yourselves and for your identity?
Well, I cried a lot. I also prayed a lot, but relying on my husband also helped. And I said that my family was very supportive. Both families, Patrick's family and my family, were very supportive. But it was, I had that guilt, and I was worried that he was never going to turn around. And so I did actually, one of the things that I do on a regular basis that did help back then and now was yoga, because it allowed me to empty my mind and just work on the exercising, and then I wasn't dealing with the worry. And I still do yoga, and that helps relax me and take away some of the anxiety that I have for various things. So that was part of it. But it was just really relying on God having a plan, and I knew that he would have a plan. And so that's what I did.
For me, besides praying, before I retired from bail bonding and bounty hunting, I was on call 24/7. So I worked all the time, and my mind just stayed so busy. Thank goodness, because if I hadn't have stayed so busy traveling, bounty hunting, and taking care of my business, I don't know, I probably would have been insane. But you do have to find a hobby or something like yoga to help. You don't want, what a drug addict doesn't realize is, I'm not hurting them. Yes, you are hurting them. It affects the entire family. They don't realize that, but it does. Mamas, daddies, spouses, grandparents, it hurts everybody. Even though you're not harming them, stealing from them, being mean to them, it still hurts because of the love that they have for you. And the drug addicts don't realize that.
That's actually one of the interesting things that came out of David going to prison was he realized how much he hurt his grandmother. He realized how much he hurt his sister and how much he hurt his brother. And those were things that he knew what he was doing to his parents, but he didn't realize that those three people that he cared a lot about, he was actually doing something. And in addition to my yoga and praying, I also have my writing business. So I tend to use writing as therapy anyway. So I was doing a lot of that as well, where I would write out my issues. So
Now, how were you not, or if you were, angry with God for this happening, for something being so far out of your control? How did you deal with that anger, that sorrow, that grief? Where did you take that?
well, I never was angry at God because I always thought it was the devil that was influencing David. So, and I still do. I think he has two choices and he can choose God's path or the devil's path. So,
For me, why, Lord, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to Justin? But you're right. If they follow the devil's plan, then, and the devil loves that. If you give the devil an inch, he'll take a mile. So you have to turn to God in true faith, 100%. And, I don't know right now where my son's at with Christianity, but he did tell me he's been to rehab. Third time was the best time. Time he wanted to go. I hadn't even mentioned it. And he called me and said, Mama, I'm ready. I'm 150% ready right now to go to rehab. And that was music to my ears because I wasn't even thinking about it. And I knew by him coming to me, he was going to put his heart in it. But he got out of rehab. He said, Mama, I want to be baptized. And I said, perfect. I will get that arranged. And he said, well, just give me some time. And we haven't really talked much about it since, but it's been so cold. And so I do hope that he follows through, but at least I know that that thought is in his head.
What would both of you say to mamas who are in the middle of it right now? And I know you both said it's not over and you're both in various places, but at that beginning stage, what would you say to mamas right now?
well, like our title of our book says, hang by faith. If you're not relying on God to give you strength, you're not going to make it. And you have to pray and let God direct you have to pray over the person who is the one with the addiction, but you also have to pray for your family and pray for protection, and you have to pray that God helps you when there's nowhere else to turn. I always, when I was doing my praying, I was thinking a lot about Saint Monica and Saint Augustine, where Saint Augustine was the one who was drinking and partying and doing all the things that the devil wanted him to do. But St. Monica was his mother and praying that he would come to God. And eventually, that's what happened. St. Augustine came to God and he changed his life and he became a doctor of the church. So I always felt like I was going to pray over David in that kind of situation where I wouldn't be as St. Monica, but I would pray for my son who was having similar issues as St. Augustine. So, but I would say that you have to not just pray for yourself, but you have to pray for your family and you have to pray for your children or your mother, father, whoever has the addiction. You have to pray for that person as well.
Well, I would say don't be ashamed to turn to your church or your family for help and guidance. Don't try to hide this. Don't be ashamed of it. As a parent, and this happens, and I know I've seen it so many years, they don't want the humiliation spread over their little, especially if you live in a little rural town. So they don't talk about it. They keep it bottled up. Don't do that. There's help out there. You know, if you needed to go see a counselor, see a counselor, but don't just live with the grief, and pray over the situation, pray for strength from God and guidance, but be strong and don't be afraid to just tell them, I have to love you from a distance until you get the help you need. Because as parents, sometimes you have to deal with tough love, and that is very tough love, because as a mama or a daddy, you never want to tell your son or your daughter, you're not welcome here. You can't come here. This is not your home anymore. But you may have to. Everybody's situation is different. So if they are being violent or you're afraid of them, get help. Don't wait till it's too late. And if you do reach out for help, who knows? It might help them to realize the amount of damage that they've done, and it'll help them in sobriety, because sobriety will go on forever. And I wish there was a quick cure for that, but there's not. And you know, I've always said, what don't kill me makes me stronger. And I have become very strong over the years because of what I've went through with the criminals and the bounty hunting, and then what I've been through with my own son. And I'm not saying there's not nothing new going to come up, but it would, you know, I guess nothing would surprise me at this point. But for the first time, I feel like I'm strong enough to deal with it, you know.
What would you, out of this book that you guys have poured your hearts into, what would you like mamas and daddies to get from this book hanging by a thread? What would you like them to walk away with?
I would like for them to walk away. What helps me sometimes when I'm talking to other families that are in the same similar situation, you feel good because you know you're not going through this alone. There's millions of Americans out there that are struggling with teenagers, with kids, with spouses, with whatever. I mean, you're not alone. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Get the help you need. And by reading this book, there's ups and downs, but I feel like this book gives you hope. It shows you to have faith in your God. There's hope out there. There's help. There's other people that's going through the very similar things you are. They're very understanding. And as Christians, we all want to help one another.
And it's also that there is a finish line and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. When you're going through it, you don't always see that light, but our book, we do have a lot of stories in there where we show how things are a lot better, and how yes, we went through hardships, but God also provided the blessings. So I just want people to realize that you can have strength, you're not alone, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you will get out of it.
Absolutely. How can listeners find more about each one of you? Find your book. Where do they need to go?
The book is available on Amazon. I have an author page, amazon.com/author/Louise Harris. The book is available on my author page, or you can just look up the book and get it through Dee. You can look up Dee's name and get it that way. It's also available if you go to barnesandnoble.com, you can order it from Barnes and Noble or one of the other major bookstores, because we do have it through Ingram Sparks, which is the wholesaler. My website is lastresearchandediting.com. And as I said, I'm an editor. And if there's other women out there that have similar stories that they want to tell, but they don't know how to get a book out of it, I can certainly help them with that.
I was doing podcasts every week. And I would even go into the jail and let them do podcasts there, and they absolutely loved it. And then COVID hit. And so since COVID, I have stopped, but I'm gearing back up. I'm getting my studio, everything back in order. And I have a long list of people that's reaching out wanting to tell their story. So
It's a heavy story. It's written out in the book itself. It's one of the ones that I had the opportunity to read. It is quite a story. So please grab the book. There's a lot of hope, a lot of opportunity in there. And thank you,
yes,
ladies, for being there.
thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Tanya. I had a good time and I appreciate
Me
it.
too.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.